The following is a tragic report of a father who was killed by his own son in the Miliswata area in Balangoda.
The victim was 74-year-old W.G. Inoris, a father of 4. Inoris brought up his children by doing odd jobs as a labourer. However, he later suffered from paralysis and was bedridden. Inoris lived with his wife in his house located in the Miliswata area in Balangoda. His daughter and son-in-law also lived in the house along with his 34-year-old son. The police believe that the 34-year-old son had assaulted his father at around 6 last evening. The victim had died on the spot. The Chief Magistrate of Balangoda, Lalit Kannangara, conducted the magisterial inquiry this morning before the body was taken to the Balangoda Base Hospital for the post-mortem examination.
In another crime that was reported today, an individual was killed in a shooting last night in Paluatta, Beliatta.
The individual was with a group of friends opposite his house at the time of the incident. Police media spokesperson SP Buddhigasiri Wardana said the individual was shot by a group that had arrived in a 3-wheeler last night. Our correspondent in the area said the individual succumbed to his injuries upon admission to hospital. The victim was 21-year-old Prabhat Niroshan Yapa Dasanayaka, a resident of Beliatta. His body is lying at the Beliatta District Hospital. No arrests have been made in connection to the shooting, while further investigations are underway.
The Voice Against Corruption organization urges the responsible authorities to tender their resignation due to the failure to maintain buffer stocks that led to the closing of the Sapukaskanta oil refinery.
खनिज तेल संस्थाව විකිණීමේ ක්‍රියාවලිය දක්වා මේ දැන් ගමන් කරමින් තිබෙනවා. මේ
This is gradually moving towards the process of selling the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. In a backdrop where the CPC refinery has been closed, we asked what the Minister of Petroleum, the Managing Director who earns a salary of 700,000 and other officials did until this happened. There is a buffer stock in case of a delay in receiving oil to the refinery. The buffer stocks are maintained to ensure that the refinery functions continuously. If the refinery process is stopped, it is a huge operation to recommence it. Millions will have to be spent. The minister should tender his resignation for not ordering the crude oil necessary for the refinery on time. The managing director who earns a salary of 700,000 rupees and the purchasing manager should also resign for the harm caused to the country. The Voice Against Corruption organization charged that there is a serious fraud committed when issuing coupons to fishermen. They do not know how many coupons were printed. We challenged the managing director of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the subject minister to say how many fuel coupons for fishermen were printed. If they say the amount, then the Voice Against Corruption organization will disband. This cannot be audited because there are fake coupons everywhere. Fuel coupons have been given to 110 fuel stations across the island. The fraud amounts to 152 million.
Now, the Secretary of the Jatika Sevaka Sangame of the CPC, Anand Palita, commented on the closing of the Sapukaskanta oil refinery.
After closing of the refinery, this loss includes a loss of more than 55 million rupees daily. This amount cannot be recovered irrespective of when activities at the refinery recommences. There are two ways of overcoming this problem. One is to maintain the current price despite the reduction in world market prices. Second is to increase the price of fuel and reduce the losses made by the CPC.
Now, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation issuing a communique said that although the refinery was closed temporarily, it will not disrupt the fuel supply to the market. The CPC also said that the administration has decided to carry out essential maintenance work for the refinery during this period.
Moving on to other local news, the Consumer Affairs Authority says that starting from today, the authority will recall samples of all imported milk powder consumed within Sri Lanka. Issuing a communique, the CAA said that Minister Johnston Fernando had ordered the authority to send the samples to not one but 3 countries for laboratory tests.
Previously, samples of milk powder imported to the country were tested after information came to light that imported milk powder contained a chemical compound known as DCD that is unsuitable for human consumption. The communique issued by the Consumer Affairs Authority adds that the Food Safety Committee at the Ministry of Health had requested the CAA to submit a report after testing the milk powder samples again. The CAA added that samples of all imported milk powder were randomly selected from the market today and had also instructed the companies importing milk powder to supply the CAA with samples. Sadly, the government has developed a problem regarding milk powder. The government is attempting to test the milk powder of a selected number of companies. I doubt that it will be of any use. When milk powder and all other food products are imported to the country, it has to be subjected to a proper inspection and should be of a proper standard. Instead of carrying out a program targeting companies and people that do not agree with them, they should carry out a program that supplies quality food to the people of the country.
A dialogue to review the role and the responsibility of the Official Languages Commission in the current national context was held at the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies today.
A group including Graham Fraser, the Commissioner of Official Languages for Canada, were present for the review.
We expect to have the whole civilization in the globe to get connected. How do we get connected? It has to be by communication. Communication has to be through languages. While promoting the diversity of languages, we also want to become connected by languages. These may seem challenges and we need to address them. The unification of my country will be entirely, or to a very large extent I may correct it, based on the ability of all our people, citizens, to understand and speak both languages in the least. When we will begin to converge in our thought and action. Language has been a barrier and it is also a bridge between people and communities. So we are now going to convert the barricades into bridges. That is the purpose of the language policy, bilingual language policy.
The website of the Official Languages Commission was relaunched at the event.
Up next is a look at Action TV.
The Department of Examinations has commenced an inquiry into alleged irregularities that took place during the Proto-Language secondary examinations, which commenced on the 6th of this month and concluded today. These irregularities are said to have occurred at the examinations hall at the Swarnamali Girls' School in Kandy. The Thera, who holds the position of coordinator of the Pirivan Education attached to the Central Province Department of Education, functioned as the head of this examination hall. Speaking to Action TV yesterday, this Thera said that the Assistant Director of Education of the Central Province overlooking Pirivan Education, who is attached to the Ministry of Education at Isrupaya, and the coordinator of Pirivan Education for the Kandy district had functioned as permanent invigilators at this examination hall under his supervision. The head of the examination hall made this statement to Action TV when we made inquiries regarding the two invigilators who had applied and are sitting for the examinations they were to supervise. The Thera, functioning as the head of the examination hall, maintained that the two monks were not applicants for the examination. In order to further clarify facts, the head of the examination hall, accompanied by one of the other two monks, came to meet with one of our representatives yesterday. Although it is inappropriate for the head of an examination hall to maintain close relations with an applicant for an examination for the duration of the examination, it is not inappropriate to maintain a close relationship with a fellow invigilator. Nevertheless, the Commissioner General of Examinations affirmed to Action TV today that the two monks in question are indeed applicants for the examination. An official of the Department of Examinations went to the examination hall at the Swarnamali Girls' School in Kandy today, laying the foundation for an inquiry following a complaint that two other monks were sitting for the Proto-Language examination on behalf of the other two monks. These two monks too had applied for the Proto-Language secondary examination against a backdrop where they had already passed not only the secondary but the final examination as well, have gained the honorable titles of Pundits of Proto-Language and are currently lecturers in the subject at a Pirivana in Peradeniya. Although the two monks who were defined as invigilators by the head of the examination hall hold senior positions in Peruvian education since they have only passed the primary proto-language examination, it is not surprising that they would have applied for the secondary examination this time around. However, it is puzzling as to why two monks who have already passed the final examination and passed well would resit the secondary examination. All four monks have incidentally applied for the proto-language examination with the recommendation of the same head of the Pirivana in Peradeniya. This recommendation is a compulsory prerequisite for participating in the proto-language examination. One of the four monks in question who had applied for the examination held the position of head of the Pirivana in Peradeniya until January this year. Applicants for the secondary proto-language examination were called for in March.
Still to come on the news tonight. Still to come on the news tonight. A suicide bomber blows himself up in Shah Shahid district of Kabul, killing himself and 6 civilians and wounding 35 others. More details on the News First International Desk. In business news tonight, Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Ashok K. Kanta, says that both India and Sri Lanka must be proactive when pursuing a more dynamic agenda of economic management. Kanta made this observation at the launch of the handbook on the India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement held in Colombo last evening.
The event was jointly organized by the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka, the Indo-Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the High Commission of India in Sri Lanka. Economists and experts in the field were present at the launch of the book.
I believe we need to be more proactive when it comes to our pursuing a more dynamic agenda of economic engagement in our two countries. When we set the target of doubling bilateral trade by 2016, it will not happen if it's business as usual. It will happen only if the two governments and even more importantly business communities on two sides put their collective efforts and see how we can tap huge synergies that exist between our two countries. And these synergies have benefited Sri Lanka.
A strong contribution by the historic FTA is already evident. Since the FTA started to operate in India 2000, the total bilateral trade between the two countries has increased by a massive 508% to $4 billion in 2012 from $672 million in 2001. While we are facing challenges in many export markets, our total trade with India in the first 3 months of this year alone stood at $732 million. We believe that these bilateral trade values are signs that Sri Lanka is well set to capitalize on India's growing consumer market, which is projected to become the world's 5th largest consumer market by 2025.